Welcome to Container-Based Architectures. My name is Tomasz Borštnar. One of the traditional challenges between developers and operations was that developers were writing the code and operations were needed to install that code in the production. And with the quick pace of change, it's hard to follow those things. So one of the possible solutions to this issue could be container-based architectures, because they contain all the application code and all the dependencies. So they are much easier to deploy, much easier to update. If you look into the architecture, you see on the left, we have a traditional application, which is a monolith. And on the right side, you have application split it into multiple parts. So you have part for the sign up, for the payment method, for the personal data, and you have part for the homepage, reports, and things like that. The good part is that any of these components, when deployed as the container, it can be independently scaled, it can be independently updated, independently deployed anywhere on the network. So you get a lot of benefits by using this approach. So with the bare metal approach, you have application running on top of the operating system. You have some binaries which are needed, you have some libraries. One of the issues that you have is if you update any of those libraries, your application could break. Then it could be the issue that when you update the application, maybe your binaries will need to be updated as well. So it could introduce a lot of issues for you. So with the virtual machines, which was the second attempt how to solve this issue, we had a virtual machine, sometimes even one virtual machine per application. In such case, it was easier because generally the operating system did not change. And if you keep the virtual machine intact, everything was fine. The issue with virtual machines was that they took longer to start, they took longer to update, they generally run longer, but they also occupy a lot of resources. And you still have the same problem that you usually use the operations, for example, need to install the software appropriately. While on the other side, if you use the containers, you have a much smaller storage footprint, you have much smaller memory footprint. You basically are able to run this anywhere on the network. So with the containers, you have much less resources. They are faster to start up, faster to change. So you get a lot of benefits. You might have some less isolation between the containers and the virtual machines, but generally these things, if deployed properly, if configured properly, they could be just as secure as virtual machines. But as I said, much faster to start, much faster to deploy, faster to replicate. So generally you get a lot of excellent benefits. If you further compare the containers and the virtual machines, they both can run anywhere. Containers are generally architecture dependent, which means that if your host operating system is 32-bit, then yes, you will not be able to run 64-bit applications and vice versa, or there are some limitations. But as I said, you have everything inside. On average, container image is on the order of, let's say, 100 or maybe few hundred megabytes big, while the virtual machine could be easily 5, 10, 20 gigabytes of storage. They have a consistent runtime in both cases. They all perform the sandboxes, but the overhead with the virtual machines is much, much higher. So when you run those applications on the machine, you have generally those containers are running in something called namespace. Namespace is like a virtual machine with its own set of processes. It could be its own networking. It looks, from the application point of view, it looks like an independent machine. But from the host perspective, they are just ordinary applications running on the system. You have some container management tools which enable you to easily start and stop them, replace them, or make any changes. And like I said, because they share the same kernel, they occupy much less resources. And there is also one big important feature of the container images, because if you run multiple instances of the same image, they reuse the same storage space. So they can occupy really much, much less space than usually. thank you for viewing this topic.